7. We're at the Miller residence, and we've gathered today with our videographer, Mike Miller, and our prompter and stage director, Al Skubal, make a video of an interview with our father, Rollie Neilitz. The video was intended to be made on June 21st, which was a special occasion because it was Father's Day, and it was also the first anniversary of our mother's death. The family got together at a mass and then a luncheon, and because of inclement weather, the video was postponed until today. The purpose of this video is twofold. Basically, it's to put on tape some of the experiences and some of the ideas that our father has that some of us have heard and some haven't heard. It's also for our posterity's sake, so that our grandchildren and others may know and come to know a little bit more about this man, our father and grandfather, Rollie Neilitz. And now we'll proceed with the interview. Start off right now with a few basic questions. First question is for Dad. When were you born?
I was born August 10th, 1905. I lived in Manitowoc all my life.
Where did you grow up?
On what they call the Fox Road. It's now 35th Street, on the corner of 35th and Vivon.
Can you give us a little background information on Mother, when she was born?
Mother was born in Stratford, and at the age of approximately 12, 13, they moved to Manitowoc, and she finished her schooling at 8th grade at St. Boniface.
Okay, gives us a little background information. What we'd like to do is to kind of divide this video up into categories, and the first category is to talk a little bit about when Father was a child, growing up, and what kind of childhood and some of the things he did when he was a child. Can you relate some of the early stories that you can remember growing up on the farm?
Some of the mischievous ones, most likely. That was between age 6 and 7. I can relate a couple incidents with my father. I helped him take a cow to the neighbors one time. Those years we didn't have any artificial breeding. Of course, we had to take them over to the neighbors who had a bull. And of course, at this stage, the cows don't act too heavy. So he instructed me to give me a whip, and he says, now, if the cow acts up, he says, just hit her. And of course, on the way up, about 2 blocks from home, the cow stopped suddenly. And he said, well, give the cow a hit. By that, the cow started off, and Dad must have tripped, and the cow was pulling him along the ditch there for about 10 feet. And of course, anything I couldn't do, but I started laughing as hard as I could. Well, anyhow, we got the cow over there and back home again, and then of course he told my mother about it, and he says, and there he stood laughing at me. Another incident was time I rode to downtown with a big wagon and a team. And of course, my father was hard hearing. He had no hearing aid at that time. And I thought, riding along, sit alongside him, I wonder if I could stop that team. So I silently said, whoa. And of course, the horses picked up their ears. They didn't exactly know whether they heard the right thing or not. But they, so I tried a little louder. I said a little louder. Of course, the team stopped. And of course, Grandpa didn't know what happened. All of a sudden, he stopped. He said, oh, what's the matter with you? Why are you stopping? Of course, I had to turn away to keep from laughing, you know. Then a couple incidents I had with Mother. I used to like to tease her. This is with Grandma, of course. And she worked out in the field most of the time. And then she did her sewing at night. We had an old lamp, kerosene lamp that time. We had no electric lights. So she'd set the lamp on the table and did her sewing. And of course, I'd like to tease her. I went by and poked my finger in there a couple of times. and if the needle didn't catch my finger and I pulled back and it broke the needle off. Of course, there was some excitement there. She didn't exactly give me a licking, but she was more concerned about the needle sticking out of my finger. And another incident is she's sewing again, and we had an old lamp sitting there again. I had a hold of a stick playing with it, you know, this way, as though I was going to hit it toward the chimney. And she, not thinking anything of it, and about the third time I went this way here, that stick broke right in half. It was a stick that she had used to take the hot clothes out of the boilers when she washed, and it was so rotten that it just broke right in half and it went right through the chimney. And of course, everything, all glass all over the floor. Of course, there was excitement there again. She forgot to give me a licking. Well, those are some of the incidents between 6 and 7. But in 1912, I was 7 years old, and then I was ready to go to school. And being all alone in the whole neighborhood, I had to walk. We had no car. The horses were in the field. My mother had 3 other children at home. She couldn't take me. So I had to walk those 3 miles down to St. Boniface School. And then they directed me down Vebon Street, which was then the town line road. And about halfway, about 18th and Division, or 18th and Vebon, I was supposed to meet some other children. But during the week, we missed our signals, and I had to find my way down myself to school. So we decided to change directions, and I walked along the Fox Road, what is now 35th Street. But this ended at Calumet Avenue. That did not go through as it does now, and which was an easy way to find out which way to go to school. So we stopped there, and I turned right, and of course, right straight down to St. Boniface School. Well, I walked most of the time. Once in a great while, I'd get a ride down there, and started in the 1st grade. Now, Grandma gave me a good start in school. I could read and write in both English and German. My big trouble was to learn how to speak English. And they were ready to send me to the 2nd grade because I was quite advanced. But then they decided, well, it might be too hard on me. And so they kept me in 1st grade. Well, that's about all I have to say for the 1st grade. But in the 2nd grade, well, all I can remember there is we made our first confession at communion. And we moved on to the 3rd grade. Now in 3rd grade, I'd like to relate an incident. I happened to be one of the top 5 or 10 in the class always. And we had a sister there by name Sister Neilitz. And for a subject, she never called on me because I always knew my lesson. But it happened that a superintendent came there to visit us one day, and she called on different people, and nobody seemed to know the lesson. And it just happened that I didn't study that lesson myself. So Sister Neilitz says, well, I'll call on Rollie, he'll know it. And I went up and I stammered just like the rest of them. Well, I heard about it after the class, she says, and you didn't even know it. So, well, we passed down to 4th grade, and Sister Neilitz passed right on with us in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. The only thing I have to say about the 4th grade is that Sister Neilitz could not sing, could not hold a tune very well. So she depended on me and several others of the class to lead the class in the singing. And so we did. She taught us Latin, and it was the first time that the 4th grade sang for a funeral mass. We went all the way through, and we got the responses and everything. That's what she taught us. So in the 5th grade, there again, she'd call on me. We used to have spelling bees where all the boys would be on one side of the room and the girls on the other side. And I was selected captain most of the time. So when the boys couldn't spell the word, of course, they went back to the captain. Then I had to spell it. So that happened several times. And then we moved to the 6th grade, of course, we had a different sister. And Sister Joletta at one time, when I was in 6th grade, got some unexpected company, and she wanted somebody to take her class real suddenly. So she asked Sister Lydia in the 6th grade for me. And I had to go back to the 5th grade and conduct the class for half an hour. That's about all I have to say for the 6th. Well, 7th and 8th grade, of course, I graduated in 1920.
Okay, we'd like to backtrack a couple of things here. First of all, it's good to know that I wasn't the only one in the family that got spanked and even missed some when I should have. Secondly, we now see where the three boys got their teaching experience from. It was from Pa's early education in the 6th grade when he took over the class. A couple of things we'd like to go talk about before we go on, and that's to backtrack and talk a little bit about your parents. First of all, we didn't mention who your parents' names were.
My parents' name was, my mother's maiden name was Adelheid Wagner. And of course my father's name was Anton, Tony for short, Neilitz. And his parents was Peter and Anna Neilitz, and they're buried out at Nordheim Cemetery. They died maybe 60, 70 years ago. And my mother's parents, Mr. and Mrs. John Wagner, are buried at Calvary Cemetery.
And let's talk a little bit about Mother's parents. Their names were?
Joe Coucher. What was it?
Elizabeth.
Yeah. Elizabeth Coucher.
Okay, and they're buried also at
Calvary Cemetery, yes.
Okay. Which is where also the site is for Mother and Father's tombstone.
Right.
Now we have some of the basics covered as far as background. One of the things we'd like to talk about is what happened to you after school. You finished 8th grade, and we want to know then what happened to you as far as, we know you didn't go on to high school, but what happened as far as work is concerned. So we know at that point that somewhere along the line music came in.
Okay. I was about 15, close to 15 years old when I finished school. And of course, I didn't go on to school, and I was needed on the farm because Grandpa Neilitz was a carpenter, and by that time, we only had 40 acres of land, and of course, he did a lot of building, homes and so forth, so it was left up to me and Grandma to do the farm work. And it's about that time I started taking violin lessons from Professor George Urban. I used to hitch up the horse to a top buggy, and once a week I'd drive down, take my lesson, and paid for my lessons with eggs. He always liked fresh eggs, and of course he took all the eggs that we could furnish him, and of course he furnished some of his neighbors with. Well, this happened for about 3 years, and I finally decided, well, farm work isn't for me. And in the meantime, then after about 3 or 4 years of violin, I decided that there wasn't much of a future playing violin, so I took up the clarinet, Sears Roebuck clarinet, by the way, and with some of the neighbors, we started getting together on Sundays and started playing a little bit. And of course, I got a job in town in the cigar store. That's my first job, and I had to sell as retail, and it was wholesale. I had to deliver tobacco, cigarettes, and so forth. And this went on for about 2 years, and in the meantime, I was singing in the choir at St. Boniface, and the director of our men's choir happened to be Professor Kiefer, who also ran Manawag Business College. And talking to him, he talked me into taking a course at the business college. So I took a leave of absence from the cigar store and took a year or two of business college. In the meantime, helping along with the chores and so forth, and I got my free board. After I graduated from the business college, I was playing in some band, the specialty band. And in the specialty band, of course, there was a big rivalry with the Marine band that time. And in the meantime, I had a fellow singing in a choir with me that suggested I go over to the Marine band, who was then run by the Goods, backed up by the man with aluminum goods. And he says, why don't you come over to our band? He says, we'll get you a job. So, okay, I met with Sorwadi on a Sunday morning. And he says, sure, he says, we'll give you a job. So, in the meantime, then I went over to the Goods, the Marine band, and I got a job at Aluminum Goods. And about this time, I was starting to play in an orchestra. And I did rehearsed all winter with one orchestra called Rollie's Orchestra at that time. And along comes Holy Week, and on Ash Wednesday, my neighbor who was playing with Randy Gloy's orchestra, a well-known, the best-known orchestra in the time, he says, we're looking for a tenor sax man. I says, well, I can't play with it. They played every night of the week, so I says, I can't do that. I says, I'm working. And at the same time, I rehearsed all winter with this orchestra. Well, he says, come on, try it out with us. And of course, when I tried out, I had no problem playing the stuff. I could read the music that you had. And of course, then the work started. Randy says, I'll get you a relief from that job. He says, leave of absence. And he said, never mind the other orchestra. It was about the poorest known orchestra around that time. So, of course, in the meantime, then, by Easter Sunday, I was for playing with Randy Gloy. And we played almost every night. And during the month of June and July and August, I don't think I had one night off. I didn't have one Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon off. And of course, I was taking Mother out about that time, and she didn't like the idea too well. I said, well, I'm going to try to get a lot of experience. Well, anyhow, I didn't get my job back right away, so I stayed with Randy Gloy's orchestra until December, when they moved up to Marinette to play every night stand there. Well, and that was 1928. That was the year Mother and I were engaged, with the understanding that I don't follow the music profession. Okay, so when that job kind of folded, a lot of snowstorms, sleet and everything else, we didn't make much money. Then about February, I decided to come back and get my job back. And of course, I inquired, and I got my job back again. And then, in the meantime, then I started playing with a few of the other orchestras around town. And in 1932, I guess it was, or 32, then the orchestra I was playing with kind of folded, but some of the fellas I had been playing with, they says, Rollie, why don't you start your own orchestra? He says, we'll help you. We'll help you buy music and everything. So I started out. That was in 1933 when I started. And of course, from then on, it was all uphill. I left the Aluminum Goods. I was laid off there in 1932. They were getting slack. In the meantime, one of the fellows that played with me was working at the shipyard, and he got me started working at the shipyard. But this was only about 3 months out of the year. And of course, with the 3 months out of the year, and did a little playing, not only myself. I used to play maybe Saturdays and Sundays with my own orchestra. But in the meantime, Romy Goss is growing so big, and he took me for every night I had off during the week. So I played quite a few jobs with Romy Goss, and we managed to keep it going. Well, by 1939, then of course the war broke out, and I started to work SETI. This was the submarine program. And then I was working day and night. My orchestra had picked up reputation. I was playing more with the orchestra. And in the meantime, until when did the war end?
45.
45. Well, then of course we had rough going that time. The tires were bad, and I kind of decided I was going to get out of the orchestra business.
Talking about our father's background in music, we just happen to have some pictures that he brought along, and maybe what we'd like to do right now is to show some of these and let Pa comment a little bit on them. Just a couple words about each one. We know you aren't going to recognize anyone, but you might just point out also where you are.
Well, you see me holding the clarinet up in the air, if you can spot that right here. And this is one of the first orchestras I played with, 1925 or 26.
Okay.
That was Tiny Loudie's orchestra at that time. Here's another picture here. This is the 1932, and that's when I left Randy Glory's band and joined this band here. But we had such hard times in 1932 that I again started playing steady. And this was the year Mother and I got married. So I went on while I was playing with this orchestra, we decided to go on the road. He had a booking agency in Winona, and we spent 2.5 months on the road. We went through Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and of course come back broke again the same way. And this is about the time Janet was to make the appearance in this world. And I was home just 1 week from the road when Janet was born. Naturally, Mother was on edge all the while, but happy to have me back home. Any other pictures?
We have a few more. Winona, Minnesota, that booking agency was?
Winona.
This happens to be where I went to college. That's just a side point. Here we have a picture also that you belong to join the Marine Band.
Yes, this was taken in 1940 or 42, I believe.
About 1934.
1934. Well,
you played with them for about how many years?
I was a Marine Band for 27 years.
Wow.
And there's another picture in the Marine Band. I think that was 1938. We had taken quite a few pictures. We had 2 different uniforms, the dark and the light. And while I'm talking about Marine Band, I left them about in the 30s, and then I joined the Two River Band. I played with the Hamilton Band for 25 years. I forgot to bring some pictures along. I also have pictures from them.
So that was Manitowoc and Two Rivers.
Yes. And this happened to be my own orchestra. Sometime about 37 or 1938. I then had a girl singer. The one place I played was at Crystal Lake, and he wanted a girl singer. And I just happened to meet one of the girls, young girls in the neighborhood that did some singing, and she very graciously joined us, and he had a very nice voice, and the band went over big. I played there almost every other Saturday.
And what was your band's name?
Rollie Neilitz.
Wasn't it in the Cavaliers?
No, that Cavaliers, that came later.
Cavaliers came later. Okay.
Yes.
Is this the...
That's another picture of the band with the girl singer on there. Incidentally, this girl lost her life in an automobile accident. And when she left my band, she joined the band, one of the most popular bands around Appleton, and it did real well. Some more pictures?
One more.
Oh, that's the start of the Packer Band here. Now, getting back to the Packer Band, one of the boys came over to the house one day. This was around 1953, 54. And he said, the Packer Band has an opening for a clarinet player. He says, would you like to play? I says, yes, I sure would. And, of course, I was with him for about 14 or 15 years. And we had lots of fun. We had about a 30-piece band, and out of the 30 men there was former high school, were all high school band directors, all school musicians. So naturally, you know, you couldn't use any chair warmers there. Is there any?
And weren't there more men than you from Manitowoc?
Yes.
And at that time?
That was Russ Krieger and Brick, Joe Weber. There's about 4 or 5 men. Mahachik.
This picture was taken in 1955. When did you quit the Packer band?
In 1967.
67.
When it was 15 below zero was my last job here. It was on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day.
And was it true that since you quit, that's when they started going downhill?
No. No, you didn't start going downhill. I started going downhill. I thought it was too rough for me to I had to make 18 rehearsals, I guess, and of course all the games. And 4 of them games were in Milwaukee and the rest were in Green Bay. And also I was laid up that time. I had surgery, and so I decided not to give the young boys a chance to play with them. Everybody wanted to get in with the Packer band that time, and I was sure was happy to be.
One of the things you'll notice is how organized we are in this video. It's well prepared and organized. We've talked a little bit about Father's past, growing up, family, parents. We also talked a little about the musical background, which of course he's proud of, the girls and their background, what they've done, and the boys and their musical talents. One of the things we'd like to next talk about would be Mother. First of all, how and when did you first meet Mother?
I met Mother around 1926, 27. And of course, those days there was all parties. My sisters happened to be involved, and one of my sisters, Isabel, was chumming around with Mother. And of course, there was love at first sight. When I saw her, I thought, well, this is going to be the girl for me. It took me a little time to get started, but we got start going together in around 26, 27, and 1928 we were engaged. But being hard times, of course, we couldn't even think of getting married, so we just went along till the 1932, which I think was the height of depression, but we thought, well, it was long enough, we better get married.
And Mother at that time was doing what?
She was working at the goods when I first met her, but the goods at that time was slowing up, and they're starting to lay off. She didn't like her foreman anymore, and so she got a job at the tinsel factory, which even paid her more money than before, and cleaner work. And she worked there for maybe 2 or 3 years after we were married.
One of the questions we've all been asking is, when you first got married, did you definitely plan on having 9 children?
No. In fact, after the third girl was baptized, Carol, the woman at the priest house says to me, well, that's fine. She says, now if you get 3 boys with it. I looked at her and says, wait a minute, these are hard times. So we got 3 boys and another 3 girls with it.
What about the last 3?
Well, must I answer that?
So the rumor is not true that after me you were going to be finished.
No.
Sherry and Mary are glad of that, by the way. They always told me that.
Definitely. And I think that that story about the more children they have, the weaker they are, that's not true. I think there's one as talented as the other one.
All in their own ways.
Yeah.
You were married in 1932. What day was that?
June 21st.
June 21st, and that's why we just had that celebration. And where were you married?
At St. Boniface Church.
St. Boniface. Who stood up at your wedding, if you can remember?
Yes, it was my brother Ray and his wife, and Mother's cousin from Chippewa Falls, I can't even think of the other one.
We'll have to consult old wedding pictures for
Yes.
that. After being married then, you went on and the firstborn was Janet.
Yes.
What we're going to do is take a little quiz now and see if you can name your other 8 children in order.
Yes. Dolores, Carol, Arthur, Joan, John, Paul, Mary, and Sherry.
Very good. Next quiz, without studying, can you name your grandchildren?
No.
That's a little tougher. How many do we have right now?
36 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren.
So at this time, 1987, 36 and 12.
Yes.
And is there any on the way? I don't know if
Not
there's
that
any,
I know of.
Not that I know of. Any plans? One of the things also we'd like to talk about is what were your dates with Mother like, if you can remember. What kinds of things did you do in the late 20s?
Well, at that time they had a girls' basketball team called the Manitowoc Follies, and 2 or 3 of the girls chummed around with Mother. So naturally that was one of our dates, following the basketball team around there. And also we went to shows, Mikado and Capitol and so forth. And then we had some house parties. That's about all I can think of right now.
What about playing cards? Is that where you learned?
Played
sheet
cards.
Was that one of the games?
Yes, we played cards too. We had several couples. Even after we were married, we played cards. We used to get an eighth of beer for 4 couples, and that was just about right. When we finished that, it was time to go home. And everybody share had, I don't know how many glasses, but it was pretty well equalized all the way through.
Who are some of those members of your card club that stood around for years?
Well, Ed and Laverne Milski. And at that time we had Roland Chouse and his wife. And Christabel's. We had, at different times, we had different card players there as we went along.
And that continued for quite a few years.
Yes, up to about 4 years ago.
Okay. One of the things you might want to talk also about are your cars. The question is, how did you fit all the kids into the car? What kind of cars did you have?
7 passengers.
Big ones.
And when the 7 passengers when they didn't fit in there no more, then of course the kids grew up and they had their own cars. They didn't always go along with Ma and Pa.
Let me talk also a little bit about here. We're going into the 40s and the 50s. We know at this time also that you worked at the shipyards.
Yes.
And when did you retire?
I retired in 1971.
So that was about how many years of working there?
Well, by the time I had layoffs in between, but I started there in 1933.
Quite a few years at the shipyards. One of the things I can also remember growing up is that you used the bean fields as a means of support.
Yes.
You said you had the farming background but didn't want to be a farmer, but you kind of was a semi-farmer.
I purchased 3 acres, and then I found out that 2 acres next to me were for sale. I bought them, and of course we planted them in beans and carrots. And about that time, all the children, of course, helped us pick. And that was about the time I took up piano tuning. I had a layoff at the shipyards, and Mother handled maybe 50 kids there at the time. And in the evening there, I think it was Art or somebody hauled the beans down to the factory. I was gone all week. I spent 6 months in Chicago learning piano tuning, but I always come home like on a Saturday morning. I got through working Friday night. I have a side job, and I came home Saturday morning, and then I'd help with the beans and sometimes play with a little orchestra. At that time I only had 3-4 men. And then Sunday I'd get my rest, and then Monday morning I'd be off for Chicago again, leaving at 4 o'clock. Those were the roughest years I think I put in there.
So we had a little bit of shipbuilding, piano tuning, and bean picking. I think a number of us kids would have our favorite bean picking stories, but we won't get into that right now. Except I just vaguely remember the time Mother broke her foot on my rear end because I wasn't picking fast enough. That has become one of the classic bean field stories. I don't remember it myself. One of the things also we'd like to talk about is your retirement.
I retired in 1971, and I was 66 years old. And the reason I worked a little longer because Sherry was still going to school, taking up nursing. And when I retired, of course, then I had worked up pretty good business in piano tuning. So that kept me going. I was still playing, helping out different orchestras. In fact, when I retired, I hadn't played for 3 or 4 years before that outside of playing with the Packer Band. And when I retired, they immediately asked me to help fill out orchestras, play with orchestras. So I did up to about 1980, I think, 1979. I was 75 years old. And
They say when you get older, the lip goes. Is that the problem?
well, it isn't the reason that I was in the hospital for 3 or 4 different times in 81, and that's the reason I quit playing then.
When you retired, we know that you took on a new sport. Can you tell us about your new sport?
Well, Mother and I, yes, we took up golfing. In fact, to the extent where we took out season tickets at Fox Hills. And we spent quite a bit of time at the golf course. And of course, the sad thing is that when she played 3 holes here the last time here, that was the last time she played up there. It's always a sad remembrance.
We talked a little bit about one of your recreational things being golf. We know that you continue to play, hit at that little ball. One of the other things we know also that you like to do is to travel. You might want to talk about some of the trips you've made together with Mother and by yourself since your retirement.
Well, we took one trip. We took a train ride the time Joan was in California. We spent 10 days there. And out of 10 days, I guess we had about 6 days of rain, heavy rain. But we did manage to see quite a few things. And another trip we took with the Kramers was down through Arkansas. We saw the Merrimack Tavern, Jesse James Hideout, and through all that, the mountains and through there, the man-made lakes. Another trip we took was to Florida with the Kramers, and we went way down as far as Miami and come back in a snowstorm.
We remember too, Mother was not a great one for traveling, and the thought of flying she didn't like, so we know you went somewhere also by yourself.
Yes, I had a chance to go to Europe. I would have very much liked to have her along, but I don't think she ever was up in an airplane, and she wasn't about to be started. So I went anyhow. I spent about 10 days. I went through Germany, Austria, Italy, a little country there, Switzerland, another one. Very enjoyable trip, but tried to cover too many things in such a short time. But I never forget it. I took a lot of pictures, and I'm not sorry I went there.
That was one of the points I was going to make. If you care to learn more about the trips, you just consult the Neilitz video entitled Slide. And that will show you, take you through the Florida, California, and the Germany trips. So we talked about the trips and about his music and some of the kids. We'd like to just go back and throw it open for any closing thoughts you have or ideas. One story you mentioned was about the fact during World War II, when one of the kids was born, one of the incidences that happened. Can you relate that story to us?
Well, like I said before, The first 3 girls were all born at home. And of course, after that, the doctors wouldn't come to the house no more. We had to go to the hospital. And I'm not sure whether it's Art or Joan, but I didn't get to the hospital. They told me it wasn't necessary to be there. And when I came home, Mother was gone and Grandma was there, Grandma Coucher. And the first thing she said, well, it's over. I says, what, the war? And of course, we got a big kick out of that. Another thing, when Art was born, that was the first boy, and of course there was a little celebration. And it just so happened that Schmitty, the trombone player in my orchestra, also had a boy about the same time. So the 2 of us celebrated. And when we got ready to go home, and Schmitty says, well, Rollie says, oh, if you can't drive, I'll drive the car for you. And I says, Schmitty, if you can drive, I can drive. So neither one of us drove.
And that was the beginning of the designated driver. Any other stories you can think of offhand?
Well,
relating to any of the kids?
not the kids, no, not really. Except that Paul happened to be the biggest one of the family. I guess he was 12 pounds when he was born.
Somebody else said the cutest, is that true?
This was about the time we were in the store, and his mother did a lot of waiting on trade, and she started nibbling on all the candies and sampling all the cookies, and of course she blamed it onto that. Another thing, when he was ready to be born, we lived in Collins, and I believe this was in February, and she was scared stiff because we had to make them 12, 14 miles to the hospital, and she says, you better take me in. So I took her in, and nothing happened for 2 days. So she finally went to Grandma and Grandpa Coucher, who lived closer near the city. And then she waited another week. So Paul was slow in coming.
Sometimes you have to wait for good things. Can you remember any other stories with the other children being born? You said the first 3 were born at home?
Yes.
And this was without, or the doctor came to the house? Did you help in the delivery?
No.
You were present.
We had a midwife.
Midwife, okay.
And the first one cost $35 for the doctor, or $30 for the doctor, and $5 for the midwife. And after 3 days, of course, then we usually get the girl or the grandmas would help us out, but then after 4 or 5 days, her mother would be up there and doing the work again.
Let's talk a little bit about, and it just came to my mind, how did you come about selecting names for the children? Do you remember any stories for names?
No stories, but we had an agreement that I select the boy's name and Mother select the girl's name. So naturally she had to do more picking than I did.
Okay.
Mother likes to relate the story that when they ever asked us how many children we had, she said 3.5 dozen. 3 boys and 6 girls.
Okay. Makes sense to me. Okay, anything else?